Howdy swim fans, here with our inaugural episode of our Whiteboard Wednesday. And for today's session, we're talking about the swimming equation. Swimming can be a really technical sport, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. If you can break it down into its fundamental components, you can gain a new appreciation for the sport and swim faster and smarter than ever before. Let's take a look. Our ST represents total swimming time. Now this equation represents two components, the underwater and the overwater. Our underwater time represents the time we spend underwater plus the time we spend on the walls, called our turn time. Now we're going to add the underwater component to the overwater component, and our overwater component is a function of our cycle count multiplied by our stroke rate. And our stroke rate is in seconds per stroke. If we use an example of the 100 breaststroke, we can put some numbers to fill it in. Let's say our underwater time in the 100 breaststroke is a function of your pullouts. Let's say we take 4 seconds on the first pullout and 3 seconds on the second pullout. Your total underwater time would be 7 seconds. The turn time is the time spent on the wall where you're not making any forward progress. So that's literally the time from when you touch to the time that you actually push off. For the sake of simplicity, let's make this half a second. Now our CC represents our cycle count. Let's say in the course of a 100-meter breaststroke, you take 40 strokes. 18 on the way down, 22 on the way back, 40. And let's say our stroke rate is 1.25 seconds per stroke. Now, if we multiply this all out, our underwater time is 7.5 seconds, and our overwater swimming time is 40 multiplied by 1.25, which is 50 seconds. So our total swimming time is 57.5. Now, this is extremely fast and would contend with the world record, but it gives you an idea of how the swimming equation works. Now, how do you get faster? That is the question. You have 3 different ways you can get faster. Option A is you decrease your cycle count. In other words, you're taking fewer strokes, you're maximizing your distance per stroke, and really focusing on efficiency. At the same time, you have to maintain your distance per stroke and your stroke rate. Now the second way of getting faster is you focus on increasing your stroke rate. That means you're just swimming at a faster tempo. At the same time, you have to maintain distance per stroke. And the third way that you get faster is you do both of these. You decrease your cycle count and you increase your stroke rate. Now this is extremely difficult, and if we were to order these 3 methods of improving your swimming performance and rate them in difficulty, the easiest one to improve is decreasing your cycle count. This is the easiest because it's focusing on improving your efficiency and therefore decreasing the number of strokes that you take. Now the medium difficulty would be increasing your stroke rate because this is a function of power and increasing propulsion, which is much harder to create. And then obviously the most hardest is if you try and do both of these at the same time, which I do not recommend. Now, if we want to think about how we apply this to our training, here's a few training tips. First of all, you need to focus on improving your max and getting a maximum distance per stroke, MDPS. It goes back to that the easiest component to improve is your distance per stroke. Now the second training tip is working on your tempo separate from improving your distance per stroke. So if you're doing a set where you're focusing on improving your stroke rate and increasing your tempo, don't necessarily worry about your stroke rate. That'll come later on. If you're working on your stroke rate, don't worry about your tempo as much. Worry about maintaining your tempo as you increase your distance per stroke. And finally, do sets that focus on the swalp. Now, swalp is swimming golf, and similar to golf, you want to have a really low number. This is basically a measure of how efficient you are in your swimming. A really simple set that you can do to work on your swalp is a series of 50s where you count how many strokes you take across the entire 50 meters and then you add that to the time that you go. So for example, let's say you take 40 seconds to swim 50 meters, and you do that in 40 strokes. So your score is 80. And like golf, the goal is to decrease that number so that you can become as efficient as possible. Now swimming, like I said, can be really complicated. But if you break it up into these fundamental components, like your underwater time and your overwater time, and then within the overwater time, you break it down into your cycle count and your stroke rate, you can start to find ways to improve your swimming that you never thought were really possible. Until next time, we'll catch you on the next Whiteboard Wednesday. Happy swimming!